So Chinatown, made in 1974, directed by Roman Polanski. Okay. Let let me just excuse my French here. Okay. But Roman Polanski is a piece of shit. Okay. He's a terrible human being. Like, I don't know if you guys ever saw any of the videos that I posted before class, but
Yes.
he's very well known for the sex scandal that he got himself into not long after Chinatown came out. Um, he apparently like he apparently had sex with a 13-year-old girl, drugged her up, and all that kind of stuff to get her ready.
That wouldn't really be sex. That would be raping someone.
Well, exactly, right? That's not it. It. He claimed that it was consensual, but you know how that goes. But even still, it's a 13-year-old girl, for crying out loud, right? So, is there? I mean, is the 13-year-old girl even able to say that whether or not they can do that? Right? No. So there's a whole big scandal. Like, he fled the United States since the 70s. He has not set foot in the United States. And the film industry continues to kiss this guy's butt. Like in 2003, he won the Oscar for Best Picture for another movie called The Pianist. About that's a movie about the Holocaust, right? So like they gave him an Oscar and he wasn't there and all this stuff. So like last year though, they said they rescinded his Oscar. I guess they got enough hot water for it in today's culture that they rescinded his previous Oscar. But they gave him the Oscar well after the 20 years after the fact. But nonetheless, it's, as far as Chinatown goes, it's a great film. Like, I love this film. It's so good, right? But it's one of those things. How can you know what Polanski did? So separating the author from the text proves a little hard to do, for me at least, with this movie, especially considering the movie's about corruption. And like, that's exactly the type of thing that protected Polanski. This is the corruption within Hollywood, right? So that's a little hard to stomach. Yeah, that's a little bit about him. You guys probably know before that sex scandal too, he was married to Sharon Tate, who was killed in the Manson murders. I think we mentioned that the other day too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, who knows if that wouldn't have happened? Maybe he wouldn't have done what he did. Who knows? We can't really speculate on that. But he's very prolific. The three biggest movies he's ever made were this, Rosemary's Baby, horror movie, and The Pianist. So those are his three biggest movies that he's made. Since the incident, he has never apologized. He's never expressed regret or remorse. He said the whole thing was consensual and that she wanted it. All right, so and the French, he went to France, and the French accepted him with open arms because they said that Americans are too puritanical with their morals and all this type of stuff. So that's where he lives now, is France.
Had he not even done that, he was still a sleazebag. His reputation and during that time, there was a lot of during the Manson murders, there was a lot of news going out, and he was being uncovered of how immoral he was. You know, everybody's got a degree of morality. You and some have less or whatever, and who's the judge of that? But I think overall, it's when I saw that, and I know you had mentioned about him being the director, I got a sour taste in my mouth, I guess, because that would have been in the day that I remember that day, those days. And but it doesn't take away from the movie. The movie's really outstanding, really.
Yeah, it's in any type of English or literature or even film here. That's oftentimes what I try to suggest doing is try to separate the author or the director from whatever the movie is, right? But in this case, it's hard. It's just hard, especially like I said, considering the theme of corruption. Hollywood's corruption helped him, right? So he's almost
Right.
he's almost the villain of this movie in a way. But setting all that aside, we have a very interesting noir here. Right? We have neo noir, as you guys called it. It's not quite the original noirs, the black and white films of the 40s through the 50s. Right? This is a new age of noir. This movie's made in color. Right? That's something that we can talk about today. How much does color change up the noir template? But other than that, we have a very standard noir type of plot, right? We have a detective out solving a mystery, right? What's going on? A fake Mrs. Mulray comes in, asks him to investigate the infidelity, and that leads to this whole plot about the water systems in Los Angeles, and that leads to uncovering all these personal secrets about Miss Mulray and all this stuff, right? So that's their basic plot. We had the Los Angeles mise en scene here. Now it was there in the previous movies. Like both the previous movies took place in Los Angeles. All of the movies we have watched do. But it's very evident here. Like they give lots of shots of the city. This movie definitely has a big budget, right? We see lots of these old 1940s cars through the movie. This movie, more than the others, definitely kind of puts you in that 1940s era, right? It reawakens that sort of nostalgia that Americans have for that time period. Now we got great performances. We got Jack playing Jake Gittes, right? This Jack actually made this movie before One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So I guess this was probably his. I said One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest helped make his career. This one probably as much so, right? That was a good 2-year period for the guy. He made this and Cuckoo's Nest within a 2-year period. We got Faye Dunaway playing Mrs. Mulray. I want to say Rutledge. Miss Mulray. Very interesting character in her own right. She's also a very prolific actress. She was in the Bonnie and Clyde movie. She played Bonnie. She was also in that Mommy Dearest movie. She played Joan Crawford in the Mommy Dearest movie. I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking about? Mommy Dearest movie?
I remember.
Yeah,
yes.
That's a movie about Joan Crawford abusing her children, like locking them up in an attic and stuff. Right.
My mom would make me watch that movie and tell me that things could always be worse.
No, that's
Crystal, things could have been worse. I think it's interesting to know too that Faye Dunaway's middle name in the movie was Cross, which leads us into some interesting avenues as we go along.
Right. I hadn't thought of that. The religious implications of that. Yeah, we shall bring that up as we go. So as always, that's my introduction to the movie. I will let you guys take it over now. General thoughts, impressions of this movie, Chinatown.
I hated the ending. Hated it. Hated it. I was so mad. I was so mad when I got done watching this movie.
Explain why. Why did it tick you off?
Like, it made me question what was the point in the, like, what was the point? What was the point in everything? Like, the incestuous dad got his daughter slash whatever. Like, oh god, it just messed me all up. I was all tore up last night, and it was like she died. And he, what happy ending did he get? You know, he didn't get anything. He watched her die, and you could see how awful it was for everybody. And then the cops, they were in the wrong the whole time, anyways. Like, it just tore me up.
Right.
Same. I stood there for the last 20 minutes of the movie just being like, holy crap. Oh my God. Doing the same exact thing. And this is kind of, it's related, but it's not, because you said he didn't get his happy ending. Something I noticed was that this also has that thing in Cuckoo's Nest where you have the walking into the sunset, except this time it's not happy, like most walking into the sunset moments are. This one's more like it's just sad. This movie, like you said, it's tragic, and it tore me up the same way.
I thought it was a key element in the whole movie because, and I was dissatisfied with the ending too, far as wanting a good ending. But as far as the movie goes, I think it teaches us that sometimes bad people win. And I believe that it led to a lot when they were, she was dead and they were leading him off. I think that he may have even fell in love with her. And if he did, he lost her ever right there. And when they take him and say, hey, the lieutenant said, hey, I'm doing you a favor. And his partners took him away. And I think that linked into that Chinatown and his previous experience there, that, you know what, and even in life for us, sometimes bad people do win. Now, they don't win in the end, but in this life, certainly, it looks like that the granddaddy / daddy got the prize he was looking for, and he's probably going to take her down the same road that he took his other daughter. So sometimes, unfortunately, bad people do win.
I see the movie as just a whole big full circle. I mean, whenever he had worked in Chinatown previously, you have that he had told her during the pillow talk that he was trying to help a woman. The more he got involved, then she got hurt, kind of leading us to believe that she died. Well, it all happened to him again, because the more that he dug on her and the more he tried to help her, the more kept, every stone unturned was something new all the time. I mean, it just kept unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. And then you come to the root of it with this wealthy man that, it's, organized crime and wealth and corruption. He was going to get by with whatever he wanted to. That's why he was asking Jack about his buddy that was the detective. What's his name? Espador or something, I forget. But that's why I asked him about him. Do you think he's honest? He's as honest as he can be, or whatever. Well, that time, even for that guy in Chinatown, had just been he got a promotion and he got moved out of Chinatown, but in the end he's still at Chinatown, and he knows that no matter what, there's nothing that you can do about it. Look, Jack, it's Chinatown. So I think that it all come full circle, and I hate it for the little girl that was a product of incest, because I'm sure that she is living one horrible life after the fact.
How did the incest plot, like, did that take you guys by surprise? Did any of you see that coming at all?
Mm-mm.
I actually had suspicions of Evelyn. Like, I was like, why is she acting so weird? Why does she get so nervous? Why is she so tore up every time her father's mentioned? And then when she actually had to admit out loud that, yes, that's my father, that was just, you could see the fear on her. She would shake. So I'm thinking that she was involved in some way. Had no idea that it was because he had raped her at 15 and she had gotten pregnant. And whenever I seen her husband in the boat with that girl, I'm like, well, yeah, he's cheating on her. Didn't realize that it was, his stepdaughter at slash sister-in-law.
Let's go think about that. What Crystal just said. And we do know it's rape. We do know, just like Polanski with the 13-year, we know that. We understand that is. And if they were in the Title IX situation, they would really be in bad shape. But it's a different time and it's a different setting. And I was reminded of something that the older gentleman said. I'm trying to find it. I had a note on it. Somewhere he said that let me see if I can find it real quick. He was talking about bad you never know what you'll do until you're put in a position like that. I don't remember the right terminologies. So he, in a way, was trying to escape real rape, saying, in other words, you probably don't know what I was tempted with at the time, even though it was his daughter. I saw evil corruptness in him then too. I think that goes much deeper than we can even imagine that it did. And probably after the movie was over, if that life continued, the young lady was in for a bad day also.
Yeah, was it you, Reagan, on the discussion board? You talked about the scene. This is a good time to bring up Jack's character, right? Because you talked about the scene where like he slaps her around.
Yeah, I did talk about that. I cited that as like why he was an anti-hero, just because that really like made me question him as his character. Like, wow, you would really beat on a defenseless woman like that, even though she said the truth. Like, that is her sister, yes. And then she said, and even after she had said she's my sister, slap, she's my
Right. Yeah, it's a very very uncomfortable scene, right, to say the least. What did you guys make of Jack's character in this as a perhaps anti-hero figure? Is he even, maybe let's contrast him maybe with Bogart's character in the last movie, right? How do these two characters compare and contrast, do you think?
Well, I believe that Jack was a very talented investigator. I think that he maybe turned over some stones that others may not have gotten to. I think that he was just had enough nerve to be able to put himself in risky situations. But every time he turned around, he's getting the crap whooped out of him. But I think that he actually cared about the case. He actually cared to know and get to the bottom of it. I'm not sure. I liked him, but I feel like that he was more of an investigator than Bogart was. I mean, I think Bogart had a lot of things kind of laid out before him, and Nicholson had to actually do a lot of investigating, a lot of digging, a lot of only an investigator is going to think in that manner, in that mind frame that he did.
The plot
I
is
think
much
he-
faster, right? It's much more complex.
Yeah, I think when you signed on the bottom line on his contract, you were his man. I believe he was going to honor that contract regardless of what it took. I don't believe he was a pure heart. I believe that he had some misdeeds about him. I don't think that he was as honorable as we would like for him to have been, maybe. He certainly was a tremendous PI. I love the scene where he goes into his into his box, into his car, and he opens it up, and there's all these pocket watches. And he gets the pocket watch out and he puts one on each side of the wheel to know what time the person left. And so I thought that was really good. And he did a lot of those little things. For instance, he noticed even in the signing of a paper from Mrs. Evelyn Mahone that her middle initial was C. And he got that together with the cross, and he figured that out long before we did. Even though we saw the evidence, I didn't figure it out until the writer brings it out later. But I loved his character. I think he was a little fish-eyed. There used to be a cartoon character years ago called Snidely Whipflash. And that's what he reminded me of. He was a Snidely Whipflash type character. But he was a good PI. He's one I would hire if I needed something found out for sure.
Yeah, to speak in his defense, he does seem to care about his clients, right? And Miss Morey, but even the other guy, Curly, right? The guy that you remember at the beginning, he's like, "Yeah, you can pay me back whenever, Curly. I'm not going to take your last dime," right? So, of course, this is a great example of a movie not wasting any scene, right? You think this is going to be a throwaway character, right? And then he comes back at the end, right? You guys probably recognize that actor from the Rocky movies.
Rocky movies. He was the brother-in-law.
Right.
But I love that how they brought him back into a very important scene. He's his getaway. That was interesting. I thought we saw that weave throughout this movie. How the evidence was put before us, or a character was put before us, and we weren't finished with him because he was going to come back and it was going to be explained.
No time is wasted for sure. We get the pictures of Noah Cross in the office, right? That's how he puts together the C thing that you mentioned.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, because he's taking the picture with Mr. Maury, right? So that's how he puts two and two together. What'd you guys think of the glasses in the salt water? Right? Did
that caught me by surprise so bad. I was that was another one of those moments where I was like, oh my God. When he said it was bad for the grass, I didn't need him to explain any further. I was like, oh my Lord, this girl really did kill her husband.
Yeah, I thought he was that too, until how he discovered that he wasn't.
I seen him originally going and looking inside that pond the very first time that he was there. And whenever he was going to try to grab it, whenever they walked out, I thought at first it was like a ring. So I thought it had it in the back of my head, like, okay, well, they've got into it and she's threw a ring in there or whatever. But then whenever it come up and that was glasses, I was like, well, that's where he died. That's it. She killed him. And then when she said, but those aren't his, they're bifocals. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like that was an aha moment for me, for real.
Were you guys distrusting of Mrs. Mulray as we went through the movie? Did she fit that femme fatale archetype pretty well, you think?
I was looking at the I was looking at the questions, trying to figure out just what exactly you wanted us to write about, because I just watched the movie a couple hours ago. I wanted to be ready right as I was done. And I got to the scene where they were doing their pillow talk, and I was I looked and seen that she was supposed to be a femme fatale character, and that caught me by surprise. I was completely trusting of her. Did not expect anything crazy out of her up until that point, and of course that's when you start getting suspicious of her right after that scene. And even just to find out that she wasn't the real killer, that also caught me by surprise. This had a lot of twists and turns I didn't expect.
I thought there
I
was
didn't
something.
trust her. Oh, sorry, Dad. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
All right. I didn't trust her. I mean, at first, I kind of had a little bit of empathy for her because someone was um, portraying to be her that wasn't. But yeah, I didn't trust her. There was something about her. She kept getting too nervous. She was always smoking, but every time that he would offer her one, she didn't want it. She was trying to play that hard role. And then whenever the dad said, "Well, I'm not sure of what she would do to the young lady," well, I mean, I was thinking I fell for his line, hook and sinker. So I'm thinking, well, she's really, vindictive, but she was just abused. That was her issue.
Well, and her dad, in his testimony while talking to um, JJ or Jake, he adds to that thought because he said, "Don't trust her. She's crazy. She'll do all kinds of things." But I believe she wasn't a black widow as we would think a black widow would be, but she was certainly a victim of circumstances. And I tend to have more sympathy with her as the plot unfolded. And that's how the whole movie did to me. It just seemed like it would unfold things. I was caught by surprise so many times in this particular movie. One thing before we leave, maybe Jack Nicholson's character, I've really never seen a movie where they pretty well kept a bandage on someone for such a long period of time. That stuck with me. Every time I saw, even when they kissed, he's got this big scar, his nose has got ripped. And I thought there was some significance to that. And every time you'd look at him, you'd remember how he got that and that he's going to wear that scar the rest of his life. When he turns away in the last scene and leaves Chinatown, the scar is not physical there, it's emotionally, and I believe he's scarred for life then. So I think there was a little bit of comparison there with the physical scar and the mental scar. I wanted to throw that out there for you.
I definitely agree with that and didn't think about it till after you brought it, to light. But I have to have a nose surgery. Like, I don't know if it's not this coming Monday, the next Monday, or the Monday after. So God knows what I'll look like the Tuesday after, and black eyes and stuff for a while. But whenever they done that and like cut his nose, I could just the chills went down my back, like I could have
too.
died. I was like, oh God, that's what they're gonna have to do to me. Like I was sore up. But that was something that really laid heavy on me. Like it was a heavy movie, but yet you were so interested in it, on the edge of your seat, just waiting to see what
Yeah.
happened next. And right whenever you think, all right, this is the case, then he would turn over something else. Okay, well, this is the case now. So like I was, like I said before, I love this genre, but I was way into it. I loved it.
Speaking of which, during that scene, it's Polanski who plays the guy who cuts Jack's nose in that scene.
Yes.
Fun fact there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Supposedly that line where Jack calls him short or something, that was an ad lib, right? So that's pretty funny whenever you whenever we think about it. Apparently, those two were good friends, right? So, so that's probably how he even got cast in this.
Well, in one of the interviews, he was very complimentary of Polanski. And I thought that was kind of odd that he was so appreciative of him, and and certainly my attitude toward him. It was a little strange, I thought.
Yeah, in the documentary I posted about the scandal, it was apparently at Jack's party where Polanski did this to this girl. So, and Jack has a reputation in Hollywood as being the ultimate party guy, ladies' man. Right? Right? So he's always had that sex appeal with women, right? Like he just has that magnetic type of personality, I guess. But,
He's very charismatic. Like Cuckoo's Nest, this movie, The Shining, all of them. He's just so charismatic. Even if you know he's the villain or he's done some shady stuff, you can't help but love him in a way.
Yeah.
yeah, the Joker, he was great as the Joker as well.
Even his comedy movies that he's put out, As Good as It Gets and Anger Management. It's like in every movie that he plays, you see a piece of what you believe that he is really like. You see a piece of his personality come out. Like I could definitely see him as somebody who was very sarcastic, and if he could get one on you, he's going to, and raise his eyebrows all crazy and his hair be all crazy. Like I love him as an actor, and I like seeing this early stuff that I hadn't seen before too.
This movie gives a good appreciation of his range, right? It's often like when if we would have done this, if we would do The Shining in this class, like one of the great complaints about that movie is Stephen King's complaint about that movie was that's not my character I wrote. That's just Jack Nicholson being Jack Nicholson.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. So that's often the complaint leveled against him. Like he doesn't have to act even, he just plays himself. Well, this is a very different character than McMurphy as far as that goes. Very different character. So I just think it's a good range. Like the Joker, you can kind of get the Joker coming out of McMurphy, or even the guy in The Shining coming out of McMurphy. But this is definitely a different role for him. They made a sequel to this movie, by the way. It's called The Two Jakes. I've never seen it. I don't know how they address what happened in Chinatown in the movie and all that, but Jack does come back to play this Jake Giddings character again in that movie. I do know that. So
when I was looking for this movie, I found that I seen that there was The Two Jakes.
Oh.
It's on Amazon.
Is it? I might watch it tonight. Since this movie's fresh on the mind. So going back full circle, let's go back to you, Reagan. After all this discussion, what do you think of the ending? After all this interpretation we've done, you still hate it?
Yes, I still don't. I still hate it. I was so mad when I ended that movie. It was just, it just messed me up. It's hard to put into words. I just can't understand what was the point? What was the whole point in it all? Where did it come out in the end? Other than harm. I kind of liked what Bill said about it though. Like he was talking how it was, life plays out like that, and I agree. But even the cops, like even our own law system was wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, it's. I'm glad you mentioned that. This is, of course, the movie's made in '74, right? Corey, explain to the class what was going on in the country around 74.
74. Oh, oh. Are you talking about Nixon or
Mhm.
no?
Mhm.
Yeah, Nixon resigned in 74. That's exactly what was going on.
Right. Yeah. This was the post Vietnam as well as the Watergate scandal, right? Suddenly, all at once in this country, we could no longer trust their elected officials anymore, right? And the whole Watergate scandal is interesting. They uncovered this based on these two guys breaking into the hotel where the Democratic headquarters were. They unraveled this whole conspiracy, and it completely rattled Americans' distrust or trust for the government. Right? You know, that's like historians often say that's one reason why Jimmy Carter got elected. Right? Because Jimmy Carter was such a nice guy, right? That you couldn't see him doing anything shady like Nixon did. So 70s cinema, like really great pieces of 70s cinema, often and all of them are very pessimistic like this. Cuckoo's Nest might be an exception. But a lot of the 70s cinema is very dark. Like Apocalypse Now certainly was, right? Like very dark and dreary and not hopeful, right? A lot of this can be attributed to Watergate and stuff like that. Bill, you lived during that time. You want to speak to that any?
Yes, the media had come full circle here. The media now was bringing into our homes not only the weather, they were now bringing in Watergate. They were bringing in the Tate Leblonsky murders. They were bringing all of these things into our homes, and now people were being uncovered of as really what was going on. Um, Back in those days, the media was a little different than it is today. We had honorable people such as Walter Cronkite and Huntley Brinkley that brought the news, and people trusted what they said. So when Nixon pulled his stunt, um, the world came to the knowledge that, hey, even our government is corrupt. Um, so I see, though, what Regan's talking about when she's upset about even the police, that lieutenant, he had went over to the dark side. And so, it certainly wasn't a movie where it wasn't a feel good movie. I think if that's what you think you're going to get out of this movie, you're not. You're going to be disappointed in that because, there's nothing new under the sun. People are, in some ways, they're corrupt. It's funny, I think, too, that it happened in Los Angeles, which is called the City of Angels. And certainly there was no angels in this movie. And you could go on with that thought, but I don't know how far. Sometimes we can take, looking at under rocks a little too far. Like, for instance, we talk about the middle name cross, which what do we think of when we talk about a cross? We think about redemptions. We think about angels as something positive. And in all of this, there's none of that. You probably, I have a tendency to look under too many rocks sometimes, so I got to be careful.
Speaking of the detective, I was totally on his side. I thought this is a good guy. They had a decent working relationship, maybe just a respect for one another. Maybe they didn't even like each other, but they had a decent working relationship. And throughout the movie, it was like, well, Chinatown, Chinatown, Chinatown. And I thought, what in the world is this about Chinatown? And I knew that it would be coming up. We were going to figure it out. But I believed whenever he told Mr. Was it Cross's name? The dad / grandfather.
Can't
Noah
remember the
Cross.
first name, but Cross, yeah. Noah
Okay.
Cross.
When he told him that he was, a pretty honest guy, like I believed that. I thought, well, he's got, this promotion to lieutenant and got moved out of Chinatown because he showed himself worthy of that. Well, obviously he did show himself worthy, but not in the way that I was thinking. I mean, he obviously let the corruption get to him. Even though he was a good investigator, he let that go out the window. I mean, you could tell that it broke his heart to just by the look on his face when he looked at Jack at the end and was like, I'm just going to do you a favor and let you get out of here. You really didn't do him a favor. He's trying to tell you something and trying to be on the right side of the law. And maybe that's why Jake wasn't in Chinatown anymore, because he stood for what was right, what was just, and not what was, who had their hands in your pocket. So I
agree.
liked him in the beginning, but I was real disappointed with how he turned out.
I agree with you. I really thought that their relationship, the background of their two relationships would come together to form like a better conclusion. Like I really thought they would come together as, with his research and his investigating, like I really thought they would come to a better ending. I think what I really expected from this ending was just more closure. Like there's so
Regan, your thought, you faded out after you said you wanted more closure. I don't know if that's what we meant to finish your thought there. It sounded like you were in mid-sentence. All right.
yeah, my Wi-Fi's cutting in and out. I'm sorry.
All right.
Now we can hear you.
I said, I don't know what you heard of what I said, but I think what really made me mad about this ending is I really was looking for more closure to so many of the questions, like what happened to the little girl and what happened with with everybody, really, like what happened with the whole scandal. Well, how did that turn out?
Right. There was no closure at all in it.
Right, and that's what I think really disturbed me about the ending of this movie.
Right. That's the two noirs we've watched so far, right? Both of those are about closure almost, right? Double Indemnity, the whole movie's about closure, right? He's telling Keys in the tape exactly what happened, right? Big Sleep, there's closure at the end. They finally solve the issue, right? So, right.
I really, as I look at this, and I was listening to what Crystal had said about the character, and then I get to looking at this, and I don't want to bring too much into it, but it looks like to me there's an underlining somebody that wrote this, or I think it was Robert Towns or somebody that he wrote this. He's got like laced in this some kind of religion thing going on, because think about it. The old man's name was Noah Cross. Well, that's Noah, that's deliverance. You get delivered when you get on the boat, okay? And the cross, that's deliverance. Then you're in the city of angels, that's some deliverance, but there's no deliverance here for anyone.
Not to mention the plot about water and his name being Noah, right?
Yes, exactly. And he even made the statement, if you can't bring water to Los Angeles, bring Los Angeles to the water. But and some of my background was in city work, and you expand your boundaries of a town. That's how you incorporate like businesses and hotels, motels, whatever. That's what they were going to do. They were going to incorporate this land, and no doubt, Noah Cross is going to have even more than $10 million before this is over. Anyway,
Did
I
any-
guess those are just coincidences, but you'd like to talk to the guy that wrote it to see if he had any intentions at all like that.
I think it's a safe bet that he probably was being pretty clever there with all the stuff you're mentioning.
Anybody else notice the exit wound coming out of her eye? How huge that was for that caliber gun. Like her entire eye was blown out. I guess I just didn't think that that little gun was gonna make an exit wound like that. But I mean,
50
I guess it
yards.
was for dramatic effect so that you could actually see, what happened. It wasn't like typical movies where it's just blood in the back of the head. It was, all the way through. So I mean, it's just a little something I picked up and just thought about.
The hole
She's
was
always
so
getting
big.
shot in movies.
The hole was so big in her eye that I didn't even realize what it was. For some stupid reason, I was thinking it was like some dumb effect they were trying to do by putting a flower there, and it just had a really big center.
Right. Yeah, you're probably right there, Crystal, for dramatic effect. Sometimes there's little goofs in these movies like this.
I do see the difference in the technology of this film compared to what we have been watching. We've been in the 40s, now we're in the 70s, and even from Cuckoo's Nest, like maybe it's because there was more scenery or whatever, but I mean, I could see such a dramatic difference between what we've seen in our earlier movies to what we've seen in this movie. And the camera there was one one scene where he's up close to Nicholson's face and the camera was real wobbly,
Yeah.
like the camera guy lost his footing or something. I don't know what was going on, but it was really weird. But the rest of it I thought was filmed great. It had the right amount of shots. It wasn't too far away, wasn't too close. The lighting, like everything like that was amazing. I thought that was a big difference in what we have been watching.
And one of the things that I read about this movie was, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's lots of scenes where the cameraman's right behind Jake. So it's not a first person view. You don't get it exactly through Jake's eyes, but you get a view of like Jake's view of things. So
Yes.
That it's like a third person kind of view. The camera is like always above his shoulder, right? Where, like I said, you're not looking through his eyes, but you're getting a bird's eye view of things. The one scene where that's very evident is when he's spying on Mr. Mulray and the supposed girlfriend, right? That's a scene where they do that.
That's also where we also see when he's spying on the girlfriend and Mr. Mulray, we also are introduced to that little boy on the horse, who we later on, another character that we think is going to be insignificant, but later on it comes back and he says I think he said something like the water just pops up in different places. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, what did you guys make of this whole water plot in the movie? This is apparently something that, historically speaking, really impacted early Los Angeles. Right? It is in the middle of the desert, right? How do we get this water? So apparently, this movie is very grounded in history, even if they change up a lot of the characters and probably rename some of the key players, right? But even today, like Los Angeles, right, it's one of their biggest cities, right? But it was founded through these sort of shady means, right?
I know the whole the quote where he said, if you can't bring the water to Los Angeles, bring Los Angeles to the water. That is kind of how it started. The only reason why you have cities inside of this city like Anaheim, Compton, Watts, all of these towns that are their own towns, but in the greater Los Angeles city, is
Right.
because of that. Is because of they had a dam. Los Angeles controlled the dam, and if you wanted to have that water, if you wanted to have the water coming from that dam, then you should kind of give up your mayor and your all of that and just say that Los Angeles is what you're a part of. And if you don't, then you can get your water through another way.
Yeah. What way?
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how they showed how the farmers were sort of being disenfranchised here, right? Just because a lot of their water was being taken from them, right? So I
But you'll
found that
notice, you notice how plush that their trees are and how much fruit is on their trees because there's water there. And then the camera again shows us a scene of the area that has no water, has no growth, and it's desert. So you start seeing as he goes and uncovers some evidence, we begin to see also as we go along what the plot is.
water is the nourishing of, like you said, with biblical stuff, the nourishing of life, but it's also destructive. Um, it's an interesting metaphor, the water in the movie.
Yes.
We even kind of went full circle with this movie because we had a little grapes of wrath type moment in here, right? Because they called the one guy, Jack called the one guy an Okie, right? So
yeah,
and the class keeps coming full circle on us here.
I like the scene where he comes into the office and he's going to joke around with his partners, and he says, Sophie, go to the ladies' room or the little girl's room. And then you see this humor in him that only he can bring across that we saw in some of his later comedies, where he's laughing and cutting up and telling this joke. And then right behind him, of course, is some company that he turns around. I thought that was a great scene. It kind of took the edge off early on in the movie. I love that scene.
Yeah, it kind of makes a little fool of himself there.
Yeah.
They're like, Jack, look. And he just keeps going with it. Yeah, the jokes about the Chinese, right? So that's not without its significance, right? Considering Chinatown was where all this corruption and stuff happens. I don't know. What do you guys think is? This is another good question. Is the movie maybe making the Chinese look to be others, right? Maybe place where crime and all this happens. We only got one Chinese character in the movie who's Mulray's servant, right? But I found it interesting that the jokes about Chinese people, right? And then the movie's called Chinatown, right, where all this corruption happens. I don't know, are we overanalyzing at this point, or do you guys think that that's?
I was wondering at a certain point, are we going to get a movie where there's not blatant racism? Honestly. Because I was thinking the same thing, and like the joke about the Chinaman, and I was like, oh, geez, that definitely sounds like a joke you would hear in the 1940s, for sure.
yeah, we'll get the movies of the present day that are a bit more progressive about this type of stuff.
I never thought about it being about Chinatown being painted as this corrupt place. Honestly, if anything, I thought the movie painted Los Angeles as a whole as a corrupt place. I didn't think about Chinatown specifically at all. But there, like, it forces a lot of stereotypes. Chinese people working as like maids and doing landscaping and different stuff like that. Just you can tell, you can tell there's Chinese born characters all over the place. So that's pretty. It kind of makes it on the nose that Chinatown is a big part of this.
Right, it's like certain sects and certain cities have reputations, like Chinatown in LA, Harlem in New York. Right, supposedly the places you don't go to, right? The shady parts of town, right? Because these certain people live over here, right? That's definitely there. You're right to point out, Corey. All those Chinese characters in the movie are servants and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's worth raising these questions as we go, right? I'm glad we're pointing it out, right? We're not leaving it there, right? Taking it for granted. We're raising the questions when they pop up in these movies.
I wanted to point out real quick because I don't know if we're gonna talk about or we passed it or whatever. I'm a really huge fan of long shots in movies where like you just have characters walking down a hallway or something, and everybody in the background is choreographed to do their things on the same at that time. And if one person screws up out of like 50 extras, if it's a particularly busy scene, then you have to start the whole 2 minute scene all over again. And you have to do that. Imagine doing that 30 times and getting close to like second 149 out of 2 minutes. And somebody screws up or something. And you have to start all over again. Like it's very hard. And anytime I catch it, I really appreciate it. But it happened towards the beginning of this movie when Jack Nicholson's character. Yeah, is it Nicholson or Nicholas? I don't know why I always get those mixed up. But anyways, his character gets out of the car, and there he's talking to I don't know who it was, but it was one of the cops or detectives or whatever. And he says he's looking for a guy, and I timed the scene. The scene. It was 1 minute and 30 seconds of just one shot. And then he says, if you want to talk to Mr. Mulray, then he's right there. And it showed the body. And I thought that was perfect. That was a perfect bit of build up for an absolutely crazy twist, I guess.
Right, he's walking along the edge of that pier, right? You know something's up down there, but you don't know what, right? So and another long shot's the end, right? Just that look up the street, at the car getting away and it's coming to a complete stop. That's another beautiful sort of long shot. That's one thing to say about this movie. Every scene is almost like a painting, right? I'll give Polanski that. The guy's very talented at cinematography, especially, right? Every scene in this movie is you can almost put it on your wall, right? It's very scenic in that way. Something else to talk about is the soundtrack. The the soundtrack in this movie is very, very good. Jerry Goldsmith is our composer. He's one of the famous. He's a very famous composer. Right? He did the Star Trek, the Next Generation music. I know. He did he's done a ton of music. Supposedly he did this whole soundtrack in 10 days. Right? He composed all this stuff in 10 days because the previous composer of the movie got fired. So he had a crunch. He did this whole soundtrack in 10 days.
Mm.
Right? Crazy. But very jazzy music in this, right? Of all these noirs we've watched, this one puts me in 40s LA the most. I think part of it's that soundtrack. Right?
Yeah, it could be.
It's so effective. Nicole, was it you who said that the soundtrack gave you happy vibes in this very dark, depressing movie?
It did almost, and it was such a confusing vibe.
Right.
Like just the music itself, I stepped away for a minute to get a glass of water and I heard the music and I was like, is this a happy point? And I came back in and I was like, oh, no, it's not. And it was just very strange. I don't know if I'm the only person that took it that way, but that's kind of the vibe I got from it.
It's a very nostalgic type of feel to me. Like all of it, you can tell that people who were watching movies then, who felt very nostalgic for film noir movies of the 30s and 40s, would definitely get a kick out of it because you got the muted trumpet and you got the violins in the background. It's supposed to sound very, almost reminded me of Wizard of Oz, honestly.
Yeah, it's very. I viewed it as this nostalgic, as Corey said. Also very. I feel it's a very moody one too, right? It's kind of got that this is a beautiful place, but something's ugly here too. I think it's kind of got that vibe to it. I can't even explain why I feel that way, but that's how that soundtrack makes me feel when I listen to it.
I'm glad you brought up the score because I was about to. I love it. I use Shazam for everything to try to figure out what the names of songs is. And when I already know the name of the song, I'll Shazam it anyway, so I'll kind of have it logged in for later. I did that all throughout this movie. I'm definitely listening to the score when we're done with this.
It was very moving, I thought. I mean, it got you in your heart and your soul, that build up music, and then it would let you down. I mean, he had great range as far as his peaks and valleys when it came to that. And I even mentioned that to Dad. I was like, man, because we had the TV cranked up, and it was almost thunderous through your soul.
Yeah, I love that trumpet sound throughout the whole thing. That's why I say it sounds kind of melancholic, right? It's very, that trumpet's very sad sounding sound. Right? Compare that to a saxophone, right, which isn't. The guy deserved an Oscar for the score for this. I think he was probably robbed. I don't know what movie won that year for sound, but yeah, iconic soundtrack. Even when you think about like old detective movies and stuff, you can kind of imagine what the music sounds like. It sounds like how you imagine it, right? So that might even be a way the movies kind of impacted our culture a bit. So, well, to close class out today, just a quick introduction to our next film. I put this next film under the noir category, but we can kind of debate whether it is or not. Right? I did so for a few reasons, but it's the movie The Untouchables. We're finally getting out of LA. We're going to Chicago. This is about the Al Capone Prohibition era. Right? It's pretty much about Capone's crime syndicate and this group of people were trying to take it down. Right, so that's pretty much what our next film is about. And that's how we're going to close out Noir. It's got Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, Robert De Niro. It's got a very star-packed cast. And it also has one of the most famous composers of movies, Ennio Morricone, who does we'll encounter Morricone twice in this class because he did the spaghetti western soundtracks, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and stuff. So he also did the Thing soundtrack. We'll talk about the Thing later in the class. So 3 movies he's scored. So yeah, I'll post some questions for you, but that's something I can already tell you to think about. Like, would you classify this as a noir? Would you classify gangster films as its own genre? Maybe. And so maybe after Chinatown, maybe this movie will leave you with a better taste in your mouth, Regan. Right? It's a little bit more of a hopeful film than Chinatown. This movie's in the 80s, and this is our first 80s movie we're encountering in class. We're going to watch several. We got movies from every decade in this class, from the 40s on. So, this is an 80s film. It won a bunch of Oscars. Sean Connery won Best Supporting Actor. That's his only Oscar he ever won. So, great film. I look forward to talking about it. Anything else before we depart for today?
What was the name of the film again? Sorry.
The Untouchables.
Thank you.
Starring Kevin Costner, Sean Connery.
You can rent it on Prime, on Amazon Prime. It was in 1987, I believe.
1987. Yeah, all the stuff we've raised as the hero, an anti-hero, and all this stuff. We'll talk about all this stuff again with this movie. So I'm excited. I haven't taught this movie before, so it's going to be good. I never taught The Big Sleep either. That was my first time teaching that one. So trying out some new things in this class.